the plastic chair pressed cold against my thighs through the thin cotton of my dress. Around me, other patients came and went with their families, their mothers adjusting their scarves, their fathers filling out forms, their siblings scrolling through phones while they waited. I watched them the way you watch fish in an aquarium, separated by invisible glass, existing in a world I could observe but never enter. My name had been called twice already. The receptionist had started giving me that look, the one that mixed pity with impatience, the one that asked without asking why a 16-year-old girl was sitting alone in a cardiology unit on a Thursday afternoon. The third time she called my name, I stood up. My legs felt numb from sitting so long. I walked to the desk with my medical file clutched against my chest like a shield, and I told her I was still waiting for my mother. She glanced at the clock. She glanced at the dwindling waiting room. She asked if I wanted to reschedule. I said yes, because I did not know what else to say. Outside, the afternoon had turned golden and warm, the kind of light that made everything look like a photograph. I sat on the bench near the hospital entrance and pulled out my phone. 3 messages from my mother, all sent within the same minute, all from 4 hours ago. The first said she was on her way. The second said there was traffic. The third said my sister Violet needed new shoes for the charity gala, and they would pick me up after. There was no fourth message. There was no explanation for why after had never come. I scrolled through our family group chat and found the answer waiting for me like a knife left carelessly on a counter. Violet had posted photographs. 14 of them. Violet in the shoe store trying on heels the colour of champagne. Violet at the jewellery counter holding earrings up to her ears. Violet in the dressing room, twirling in a gown that probably cost more than my medical bills. My mother appeared in several photos, her face bright with the particular joy she reserved for my sister, the kind of joy I had spent my entire life trying to earn and never quite reaching. The timestamps told the story my family would never admit. They had been shopping for 5 hours. They had driven past this hospital to reach the mall. They had forgotten me with the same ease that I forgot to water the plant on my windowsill. The one that had died 3 weeks ago because I could not remember it existed. I called my mother. She answered on the 6th ring, her voice breathy with distraction. "Where are you?" I asked. "Oh, Sienna," she said, and I heard it in those 2 words. The slight pause, the recalibration, the moment she remembered she had a second daughter. We got caught up. Violet found the most beautiful dress. "We're having dinner now. Can you take a taxi home?" I told her yes. I told her it was fine. I told her the appointment had gone well, even though I had not seen a doctor, even though my heart was doing that strange fluttering thing again, even though I had been referred to this specialist precisely because my school nurse had heard something concerning in my chest during a routine checkup. I took a taxi home with money I had saved from my part-time job at the bookstore. I ate dinner alone in the kitchen while my family laughed at a restaurant somewhere across the city. I went to bed early and stared at the ceiling and wondered if I was being dramatic, if I was being ungrateful, if this was simply what it meant to be the second daughter in a family that had only ever wanted one. The fluttering in my chest grew worse that night. I pressed my hand over my heart and felt it skip and stumble like a child learning to walk. I thought about calling my mother again. I thought about telling her something was wrong. I thought about the way she had sounded on the phone, distracted and distant, her attention already wandering back to Violet before she had even finished speaking to me. I decided to wait until morning. I decided I was probably fine. I decided that making a fuss would only prove what I suspected they already believed, that I was dramatic, attention-seeking, difficult in ways my sister had never been. I fell asleep with my hand still pressed over my heart. I did not wake up. The moment of death was not what I expected. There was no tunnel of light, no parade of memories, no profound realization about the meaning of existence. There was only a strange heaviness in my chest that spread outward until it consumed everything, and then there was nothing. And then there was something else entirely. I became aware of absence first. The absence of pain, the absence of the constant low-grade anxiety that had lived in my body for as long as I could remember, the absence of the desperate need to be seen, to be chosen, to be enough. I floated in that absence like a leaf on still water, and I understood with perfect clarity that I was dead. The understanding did not frighten me. It felt, instead, like setting down a heavy bag I had carried so long, I had forgotten it was not part of my body. I had spent 16 years trying to earn love that was never going to be freely given. I had spent 16 years performing a version of myself that might be worthy of attention. I had spent 16 years dying slowly, and now I was simply finished. But the darkness did not last. Something pulled at me, gentle but insistent, like a hand reaching into deep water. I felt myself moving without motion, travelling without distance, returning to something I had only just left. I opened my eyes to sunlight streaming through familiar curtains. I was in my bedroom. My old bedroom, the one with the faded butterfly wallpaper and the desk covered in textbooks and the window that looked out over the garden. I was lying in my bed, and my heart was beating steadily in my chest, and my body felt small in a way it had not felt in years. I sat up, slowly. My hands were smaller, my legs were shorter. The room around me was exactly as I remembered it from 3 years ago, down to the specific arrangement of books on my shelf and the photograph of my family on my nightstand. The photograph caught my attention. I picked it up and studied the 4 faces frozen behind glass. My father, distinguished and distant. My mother, elegant and distracted. Violet, golden and glowing. And me, standing slightly apart from the others, my smile not quite reaching my eyes. I was 13 in this photograph. I was 13 now. The realization settled over me like snow, quiet and cold and somehow inevitable. I had died at 16. I had been sent back to 13. I had been given a second chance, and this time I understood something I had not understood before. I could not make them love me. I had tried everything, been everything, given everything, and it had not been enough because it was never going to be enough. The problem was not my performance. The problem was their capacity. My family had a finite amount of love, and they had given it all to Violet, and there was simply nothing left for me. The understanding should have broken me. Instead, it set me free. I got out of bed and walked to my mirror. The girl looking back at me was small and soft and still carried hope in her eyes. She did not know yet that she would spend 3 more years chasing something uncatchable. She did not know yet that she would die alone in her bedroom while her family ate dessert at a restaurant. I touched my reflection's face. I made her a silent promise. This time would be different. This time I would not wait to be chosen. This time, I would choose myself. The first divergence came 3 days after my return. I woke to the sound of my mother calling my name, her voice carrying that particular note of inconvenience that meant she needed something from me. In my first life, I would have jumped out of bed immediately. I would have rushed downstairs still in my pajamas, eager to be useful, desperate to be needed. I would have said yes to whatever she asked, because saying yes was the only language I knew. In this life, I took my time. I brushed my teeth. I washed my face. I got dressed in clothes I actually liked instead of the muted colours my mother preferred. I walked downstairs at a pace that suited me, not at a pace designed to demonstrate my willingness. My mother was in the kitchen, her phone pressed between her ear and her shoulder while she rummaged through her purse. She looked up when I entered, and I saw the flicker of surprise in her eyes at my appearance, at the bright yellow of my sweater, at the way I walked to the refrigerator and poured myself juice before acknowledging her. "Sienna," she said, covering the phone with her hand. I need you to stay home today. Violet has her piano competition, and someone needs to wait for the delivery. I took a sip of my juice. I considered my response. In my first life, I would have agreed instantly, swallowing my disappointment at missing the Saturday I had planned with my books and my solitude. I have plans, I said. The words hung in the air between us like something physical. My mother stared at me as if I had spoken in a foreign language. Sienna, she said again, her voice sharpening. This is important. So are my plans. I watched the calculations happening behind her eyes, the confusion, the irritation, the unfamiliar experience of her second daughter pushing back against an expectation. What plans? She asked, and I heard the disbelief in her voice, the assumption that nothing I could possibly have planned would be more important than waiting for a delivery while my family attended yet another of Violet's performances. I'm going to the library, I said. I have a project due. It was not a lie. I did have a project. But I had never before considered my own work important enough to mention, let alone defend. My mother opened her mouth to argue. I watched her do the mental arithmetic, weighing the cost of forcing me against the inconvenience of finding another solution. In the end, convenience won. It always did. Fine, she said, turning back to her phone. I'll ask Mrs. Patterson from next door. She did not ask what my project was about. She did not wish me good luck. She simply returned to her conversation, already forgetting that I had been in the room at all. I finished my juice and walked to the front door. My father passed me in the hallway, adjusting his tie, his attention fixed on some distant concern that had nothing to do with his younger daughter. Going out, I said. He nodded without looking at me. I stepped outside into the cool morning air and felt something unfamiliar expanding in my chest. It took me a moment to recognize it. It was freedom. The months that followed taught me things I had been too desperate to learn in my first life. I learned that saying no did not cause the world to end. I learned that my value did not depend on my usefulness. I learned that the attention I had craved so desperately was not worth the contortion required to earn it. I stopped volunteering for tasks that no one thanked me for. I stopped arranging my schedule around Violet's activities. I stopped sitting in the living room pretending to read while really waiting for someone to notice me, to speak to me, to remember that I existed. Instead, I spent my time in places that fed my soul. The library became my sanctuary, its quiet shelves offering me a kind of acceptance my home never had. The bookstore where I would later work in my first life became familiar to me years earlier. Its owner, a gentlewoman named Grace, who seemed to understand without being told that I needed somewhere to belong. I made friends carefully, choosing people who saw me without being told where to look. A girl named Iris, who sat behind me in English class and passed me notes with drawings of dragons in the margins. A boy named Theodore, who worked at the coffee shop near the library and always remembered how I took my tea. A teacher named Mrs. Wallace, who noticed the quality of my writing and encouraged me to submit to the school literary magazine. These connections were different from the ones I had made in my first life. In my first life, I had chosen friends who reminded me of my family, people who kept me at arm's length, who took my presence for granted, who forgot about me the moment I left the room. In this life, I chose people who chose me back. The change in me did not go unnoticed at home, though it was noticed in the wrong ways. My mother commented that I had become distant. My father observed that I seemed different. Violet complained that I never wanted to do things with her anymore. They did not understand that distance was not rejection. They did not understand that different was not deficient. They did not understand that my unwillingness to be at Violet's constant disposal was not cruelty, but self-preservation. I had spent my first 13 years as an afterthought. I refused to spend my second 13 years the same way. The day arrived again on a Thursday afternoon in autumn, 3 years after my return. I was 16 again. The leaves were turning gold outside my window. The air had that particular crispness that marked the boundary between seasons. My mother called me downstairs after breakfast. She was dressed for shopping, her keys already in her hand, her attention already scattered between her phone and her purse, and the mental list of tasks that occupied her constantly. "Sienna," she said, "we need to take you to that heart appointment today." I stood in the kitchen doorway and felt time fold in on itself. This was the moment. This was the morning that had started it all, the morning that had led to the lobby and the waiting and the dying alone in my bedroom. But I was not the same girl I had been in my first life. I had spent 3 years building something inside myself, something solid and certain that did not depend on whether my mother remembered to pick me up. "What time?" I asked. 2 o'clock, she said. "I'll drive you." I nodded. I did not thank her. I did not express gratitude for something that should have been given without question. I went upstairs and packed a bag. In it, I placed a book I was reading, my phone charger, my wallet with enough money for a taxi, and a snack from my own collection of supplies. I had learned in my first life that hoping for rescue was a form of self-destruction. I had learned in this life to rescue myself. At 1:30, my mother appeared in my doorway. She was dressed differently now, her shopping clothes replaced by a flowing dress that meant she had somewhere else to be. "Sienna," she said, and I heard it. The same slight pause, the same recalibration, the same moment of remembering she had a second daughter. "Violet needs shoes for the charity gala," she continued. "We're going to stop at the mall on the way to the hospital. It might make us a few minutes late, but the appointment is just a checkup. It'll be fine." I looked at my mother. I saw her clearly, perhaps for the first time. I saw the way her eyes had already moved past me to the phone in her hand. I saw the way her body was angled toward the door, toward Violet, toward the life she actually wanted to live. "Actually," I said, "I'll take a taxi." The words landed between us like stones in still water. My mother blinked. "What?" "I'll take a taxi to the appointment. You and Violet can shop as long as you need." I did not say it with anger. I did not say it with accusation. I simply said it as a fact, a statement of reality, a description of the way things were going to be. My mother stared at me. I could see her trying to find the trick, the manipulation, the hidden complaint behind my words. She was so accustomed to my first life's version of me, the one who would have agreed to the plan and then suffered silently when it inevitably fell apart. "Sienna," she said, her voice uncertain, "you don't need to do that. We'll be there." "You'll be shopping," I said. "I'll be at the hospital. It's simpler this way." I picked up my bag and walked past her. I did not wait for permission. I did not seek approval. I simply left. The taxi ride to the hospital took 20 minutes. I sat in the back seat and watched the city pass by outside the window, the same streets I had travelled in my first life, the same buildings and billboards and intersections. Everything was the same, and everything was different. I arrived at the cardiology unit 30 minutes early. I checked myself in at the reception desk, handed over my medical file, and sat down in one of the plastic chairs to wait. The receptionist did not give me that look, the one mixed with pity and impatience. She simply processed my paperwork and called my name when it was time. The doctor was a kind woman with silver hair and gentle hands. She listened to my heart through her stethoscope, and I saw her expression shift as she heard what the school nurse had heard months ago. "There's an irregularity," she said. "It's not immediately dangerous, but it needs monitoring and possibly treatment. I'm going to order some tests." She explained the condition to me in clear, simple language. She answered my questions with patience and respect. She treated me like a person capable of understanding my own health, and I realised that this was what it felt like to be taken seriously. When I left the hospital 2 hours later, I had a treatment plan, a follow-up appointment, and a prescription that would manage the arrhythmia that had killed me in my first life. I had also saved my own life, not because anyone rescued me, not because anyone remembered to care, but because I had learned to care for myself. My phone buzzed as I walked to the bus stop. A message from my mother. How did it go? I looked at the words on the screen. In my first life, I would have responded immediately. I would have downplayed my fear and my relief and my anger. I would have made it easy for her to forget what she had almost caused. In this life, I typed a response and took my time sending it. Fine. I'm taking the bus home. I did not mention the diagnosis. I did not mention the prescription. I did not give her the opportunity to perform concern she did not feel. She would find out eventually, but she would find out on my terms, in my time, when I was ready to share. The bus carried me home through the golden afternoon light. I watched the city pass by and felt my heart beat. Steady now, regular now, alive now. I had changed my fate with a taxi ride and a declaration of independence. It was such a small thing. It was everything. The charity gala arrived 2 weeks later. It was the same event that had prompted the shopping trip in my first life, the same event that had been more important than my health, the same event that Violet had prepared for while I sat alone in a hospital lobby. In this life, the event unfolded differently. Violet swept downstairs in her champagne gown, her hair styled, her makeup perfect. My mother followed close behind, adjusting Violet's necklace, smoothing invisible wrinkles from Violet's skirt. My father waited by the door in his tuxedo, checking his watch with the impatience of someone who had somewhere important to be. They formed a tableau of family without including me. It was such an old arrangement that they did not even seem to notice my absence from it. I watched from the top of the stairs. I wore jeans and a comfortable sweater. I had a book waiting on my nightstand and a cup of tea cooling on my desk. "Sienna," my mother called up without looking, "we're leaving. There's food in the refrigerator." "Have fun," I said. The words were simple. The absence of bitterness was deliberate. My family swept out the door in a cloud of perfume and self-importance. The house fell silent around me, and I felt the peace of it settle into my bones. I went to my room, I read my book, I drank my tea. I went to bed at a reasonable hour and slept deeply and well. In my first life, I had stayed awake that night consumed by loneliness and rejection. In this life, I simply let them go. The gala, I learnt later, did not go as planned. Violet had expected to be the centre of attention. She had prepared for weeks, selected her dress with obsessive care, rehearsed her conversations, and her laughter and her graceful acceptance of compliments. But something had shifted in the social landscape of our community. Something small but significant. The daughter of a prominent family had taken an interest in me, of all people. Not Violet, me. Her name was Eleanor, and she was the kind of person who noticed everything and said little. She had observed me at school, at the library, at the coffee shop where Theodore made my tea. She had watched the quiet confidence I had built over 3 years of choosing myself, and she had found it interesting. At the gala, Eleanor asked my mother where I was. My mother, unprepared for this question, said something vague about me staying home. Eleanor's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. She asked why I had not been invited. My mother, even more unprepared for this follow-up, said something even vaguer about my preferring to stay home. Eleanor nodded slowly. She spent the rest of the evening engaging politely with Violet, while somehow making it clear that her interest lay elsewhere. I learned all of this secondhand, pieced together from fragments of conversation I overheard. When my family returned home that night, my mother's voice carried confusion, my father's carried irritation. Violet's carried something new, something I had never heard from her before: uncertainty. The next day, Eleanor appeared at the bookstore where I now worked on weekends. She browsed the shelves with genuine interest, asked thoughtful questions about my recommendations, and left with 3 books and an invitation. Her family was hosting a garden party the following weekend. She wanted to know if I would come. I said yes. The garden party was beautiful, the kind of event that appeared effortlessly elegant, while requiring enormous effort to produce. Lanterns hung from trees, flowers arranged themselves in careful abandon. Guests in flowing dresses and summer suits mingled on the lawn, their laughter mixing with the soft strains of live music. I arrived alone, in a dress I had chosen myself, in colours that suited my skin rather than fading into the background my mother preferred. Eleanor greeted me at the entrance with genuine warmth and introduced me to the other guests with obvious pride. "This is Sienna," she said. "She's the most interesting person I know." The words landed differently here than they would have at home. Here, people listened. Here, people saw. Here, my value was not measured against Violet's brightness, but appreciated on its own terms. I spent the afternoon in conversation with people who asked questions and listened to answers. I discussed books with Eleanor's father, and art with Eleanor's mother, and music with a young man named William, who played violin, with the small ensemble providing entertainment. No one compared me to my sister. No one asked why I was not more like Violet. No one looked through me towards someone more interesting. I was simply myself, and that was enough. My family arrived halfway through the party. They had not expected to find me there. They had not expected to find me at the centre of a small circle of engaged listeners, telling a story about something I had read, my voice steady, my presence established, my belonging unquestioned. Violet's face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Surprise, confusion, something that might have been the beginning of respect. My mother's face showed something closer to alarm. The careful architecture of our family dynamic did not account for this version of me. The one who existed outside her shadow. The one who had built a life she knew nothing about. "Sienna," she said, approaching with careful casualness. "I didn't know you were coming." "Eleanor invited me," I said. The simplicity of the statement contained multitudes. I had been invited somewhere, my family had not taken me. I had been chosen by someone outside the closed circuit of our household. I had been seen by eyes that did not look through me. My mother did not know what to say. For perhaps the first time in my memory, she was at a loss. I excused myself politely and returned to my conversation. I did not invite my family to join. I did not explain myself or apologize for my presence. I simply continued being exactly who I had become. The party ended as the sun set, painting the garden in shades of gold and rose. Eleanor walked me to the gate and thanked me for coming. "You're different from what I expected," she said. I smiled. "What did you expect?" "I don't know. Someone smaller, maybe. Someone who faded into the background." "But you don't fade at all. You just wait until people are ready to see you." The words stayed with me long after I returned home. Someone who waited until people were ready to see me. It was such an accurate description of who I had become, so different from the girl who had died chasing visibility in her first life. Home was quiet when I arrived. My parents had taken Violet somewhere, probably for dinner, probably to discuss what had happened at the party. I made myself a simple meal in the kitchen and ate it alone, but the aloneness felt different now. It felt chosen rather than imposed. The shift accelerated after the garden party. Eleanor became a regular presence in my life, a friend who valued me without requiring performance. Through her, I entered social circles that had been closed to Violet. Not through competition, but through simple belonging. My parents noticed. Of course they noticed. Their second daughter had somehow become visible in spaces they cared about, had somehow built connections they had not facilitated, had somehow become someone they did not recognize. My mother's approach changed in subtle ways. She began asking about my plans rather than assuming I had none. She began mentioning my name in conversations rather than only Violet's. She began looking at me with something like confusion, as if trying to reconcile the daughter she had overlooked with the daughter who existed in the world. It was too late, of course. 3 years of building myself had created something that no longer needed her approval. 3 years of choosing my own worth had made me immune to her belated attention. But I did not tell her this. I simply continued being exactly who I was. Violet's journey was more complicated. She had spent her entire life as the favourite, the chosen one, the daughter who received all the love and attention our family had to offer. She had not earned this position through malice. She had simply been born into it, had been assigned it, had been taught by every interaction that her value was absolute and unquestioned. The garden party cracked something in her certainty. The subsequent months widened the crack into a fissure. She began watching me the way I had once watched her, trying to understand the alchemy of my transformation. She began asking questions I did not know how to answer, questions about what I did with my time, who my friends were, why I seemed so different from the sister she remembered. I told her the truth, but only the surface of it. I told her about the library and the bookstore and Eleanor and the small pleasures I had built into a life. I did not tell her about the lobby, or the waiting, or the death. Some truths were too heavy for casual sharing. But something changed between us nonetheless. Violet began treating me less like an accessory and more like a person. She began remembering conversations we had started and finishing them later. She began asking for my opinion on things that mattered to her, and she began listening to my answers. It was not a complete transformation. Years of habit did not dissolve overnight, but it was a beginning, a crack in the armour of assumption that had separated us. I allowed it cautiously. I had learned too much about the cost of hope to give it away freely. The true karmic reversal arrived on a winter evening, exactly 1 year after the day I should have died. My mother was preparing for another charity event, another gala, another opportunity to display Violet in her natural habitat. She had been planning for weeks, coordinating outfits and hairstyles and transportation with the intensity she brought to all things Violet. "Sienna," she called upstairs, "can you come help Violet with her zipper?" The request was so familiar, so exactly aligned with my role in our family, that I almost complied automatically. But I paused at the top of the stairs and felt the weight of the moment settle over me. This was the mirror. This was the scene returning with reversed power. This was my opportunity to demonstrate how far I had come. "I'm getting ready myself," I said. The silence that followed was profound. My mother appeared at the bottom of the stairs, her face a study in confusion. "Getting ready for what?" "The gala," I said. "Eleanor invited me." The words landed with visible impact. My mother's expression shifted through surprise, disbelief, and something that might have been recognition. "You're going to the gala," she repeated slowly. "Yes." "With Eleanor Ashford." "Yes." My mother did not move for a long moment. I watched her processing this information, trying to fit it into her understanding of our family, trying to reconcile the daughter she had overlooked with the daughter who had been invited to the same event by someone far more prominent than any of Violet's connections. "I see," she said finally. Her voice was careful, controlled, different. I went back to my room and continued getting ready. I had chosen my own dress, a deep blue that brought out the warmth in my eyes. I had arranged my own hair in a style that suited my face. I had prepared myself without assistance or approval, or the desperate hope of being seen. When I descended the stairs an hour later, my family was waiting by the door. Violet looked beautiful in her designer gown. My parents looked distinguished in their formal attire. They looked like a portrait of a perfect family, and they looked at me like they were seeing me for the first time. "You look wonderful," my mother said. The words were simple. They were also the first genuine compliment she had given me in as long as I could remember. "Thank you," I said. I did not return the compliment. I did not perform the elaborate gratitude I would have performed in my first life. I simply accepted her words and moved toward the door. Eleanor's family sent a car for me. This small detail, this minor fact, this evidence of my separate belonging, shifted something in the air of our foyer. My family would be driving together in my father's car. I would be arriving separately, independently, as an invited guest in my own right. My mother watched me walk to the waiting car. I could feel her gaze on my back, and I understood something about her in that moment. She had not meant to neglect me. She had not consciously chosen to forget me in hospital lobbies or shopping trips or the 1,000 small moments of daily life. She had simply been blind, had simply followed the path of least resistance, had simply given her attention to the daughter who demanded it most. But blindness was not innocence. Lack of intention did not erase impact. She had failed me through absence rather than malice, but she had failed me nonetheless. I climbed into Eleanor's car and did not look back. The gala was everything the garden party had promised. Lights and laughter, and the soft murmur of important people discussing important things. Eleanor met me at the entrance with a smile that held genuine warmth. "You came," she said. "I came." We entered together, and I felt the room shift around me. Not dramatically, not with fanfare, but with the subtle acknowledgement that I belonged here, that I had been invited, that my presence was expected and welcomed. My family arrived 20 minutes later. I was already deep in conversation with a group that included Eleanor's parents and several other prominent figures from our community. I saw them enter from the corner of my eye, saw them scan the room, saw them locate me with something like surprise. Violet approached first. She looked beautiful, of course. She always looked beautiful. But there was something uncertain in her expression, something I had never seen there before. "Sienna," she said, "I didn't know you knew these people." "I didn't," I said. "Now I do." The simplicity of the answer seemed to unsettle her. In her world, connections were earned through performance and positioning. In my world, connections simply happened when people saw each other clearly. She stood beside me for a moment, clearly uncertain of her role. In our usual dynamic, I would have stepped back to let her shine. I would have faded into the background to make room for her presence. I did not step back. I did not fade. I simply continued being exactly where I was. "This is my sister," I said to the group. "Violet, these are Eleanor's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Ashford." The introduction was polite but pointed. I was bringing Violet into my circle rather than being absorbed into hers. I was the one making introductions rather than waiting to be introduced. The reversal was complete and quiet and powerful. Violet spent the rest of the evening slightly off balance, unsure of how to navigate a space where she was not automatically the centre of attention. She was still charming, still graceful, still everything she had always been. But for the first time, her charm was not enough. She had to earn her place, just like everyone else. My mother found me near the end of the evening. She looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with physical exhaustion. She looked like someone who had been forced to see something she had spent years avoiding. "Sienna," she said, "can we talk?" I nodded and followed her to a quiet corner of the room. We stood facing each other, mother and daughter, strangers in familiar bodies. "I owe you an apology," she said. The words hung between us, unexpected and somehow inevitable. "For what?" She paused. I saw her struggling with something, wrestling with the weight of acknowledgement, trying to find words for a failure. She had only just begun to understand. "I missed your appointment," she said finally. "That day with the shopping, I remember now. I got distracted, and you had to take a taxi, and I never asked how it went. I never asked if you were okay. It was such a small piece of the whole picture." She had missed so much more than one appointment. She had missed my entire childhood, had missed the slow accumulation of abandonment that had killed me in my first life. But it was a beginning. It was an acknowledgement. It was more than she had ever offered before. "The appointment went fine," I said. "I have a heart condition. It's being managed. I'm okay." My mother's face went pale. "A heart condition? Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you didn't ask. Because you were busy. Because I learned a long time ago that telling you things only worked if you were listening." I did not say these words with cruelty. I said them with the flat truth of observation, the same way I might describe the weather or the time. My mother absorbed them. I watched her process the weight of what I was saying, the weight of what I was not saying, the weight of all the years she had spent looking through me towards something more interesting. "I'm sorry," she said again. "I'm so sorry." "I know," I said. I did not say I forgave her. I did not offer her the absolution she was seeking. Forgiveness was not something I owed her simply because she had asked. But I also did not close the door. I left it slightly ajar, the way you leave a door for someone who might eventually learn to walk through it on their own. The gala ended, and I went home in Eleanor's car. My family arrived later, and the house settled into its familiar nighttime quiet. But something had changed. Something had shifted in the architecture of our household, in the careful balance of attention and neglect that had defined us for so long. My mother began making an effort. It was clumsy at first, awkward and uncertain, like someone learning to use muscles that had atrophied from disuse. She asked about my day, she remembered my appointments, she looked at me when I spoke instead of looking through me. My father followed her lead, as he always did. He began noticing things about me that he had overlooked for years, my grades and my friends and the small accomplishments that made up a life. Violet changed the most. The garden party and the gala had cracked something in her certainty, and the months that followed widened the crack into transformation. She began treating me as an equal rather than an accessory. She began asking for my advice instead of assuming she had nothing to learn from me. She began building a relationship with me that was separate from our parents' preferences. It was not perfect. Years of habit did not dissolve overnight, but it was something. I had died alone in my bedroom, forgotten by a family that could not be bothered to remember me. I had been reborn with the knowledge of my own worth and the determination to protect it. I had built a life that did not depend on their attention, and in the end, that independence was what drew them to me. I sat in my bedroom on a spring evening, 1 year after my second 16th birthday. The window was open, and the night air carried the scent of flowers from the garden below. My heart beat steadily in my chest, managed now by medication and vigilance, alive now through my own choices. I thought about the girl who had died in this room 3 years ago. She had been so tired, so worn down by the constant effort of trying to be seen. She had given everything she had to a family that barely noticed, and in the end, she had simply stopped. I was not that girl anymore. I was someone new, someone who had learned to sit in lobbies alone and be okay with it, someone who had learned that love was not a prize to be earned but a choice to be made, someone who had learned that the only approval that truly mattered was her own. My phone buzzed. A message from Eleanor, asking if I wanted to get coffee tomorrow. A message from Violet, asking if I could help her with an essay. A message from my mother, reminding me about a family dinner this weekend and asking if I had any requests for the menu. I read them all. I answered them all. I set the phone aside and returned my attention to the night outside my window. The stars were out, scattered across the darkness like promises. I had died once beneath those stars, alone and forgotten. I had been reborn beneath them, determined and clear. I had learned to sit in lobbies alone. I had learned to save myself. I had learned that the best revenge was not confrontation, but simply becoming someone who no longer needed what had been withheld. I was at peace. I was powerful. I was finally completely free. The night settled around me like a blanket, and I closed my eyes and let myself simply be. The protagonist always reclaims control. The antagonist always faces karmic recognition and regret. Power shifts silently through emotional symmetry, not confrontation. I had followed the rules without knowing they existed. I had written my own rebirth story in the language of quiet determination and self-chosen worth. And now, at last, the story was complete.